All right. Can we all see this?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I guess you four all know the drill, but leave feedback. If you have any feedback to leave, it's appreciated. And if you have any questions anytime, feel free to jump in as usual. Okay, so today I want to, I'm not sure how many of you were here last time, but I want to kind of wrap up what we were talking about last time that we didn't get a chance to finish completely. And then we're going to talk about some stuff to think about when you're building applications in terms of the consequences for what you have to do on the client side, your web application. So this part should be pretty easy today. Not going to throw anything crazy at you. Hopefully, get something out of it. If not, you can just tell me to talk about something else. Okay, so yeah, so if you were here last time, you'll recall kind of the premise that we were talking about. And if you weren't, as a quick recap, last time we kind of had this sprint example where we looked at trying to build a web application similar to the online chess application PyChess. And so we said, okay, here's some features that we want. In particular, we want to support the ability to play live chess games. We want to also make it kind of a social and interaction setting where you can see how other people are doing and how you're doing, in an up-to-date manner. And you can also see the community of people that are playing, so you can see live games that are happening. Of course, the social part of this comes into play too, as the sense that when you're playing with someone, maybe you want to have some chat window for some banter or whatever, right? And so we ran through a few different kinds of problems that we might run into when we're thinking about the architecture of this kind of thing, on the server or the logic side. And we said, okay, like how can we deal with these problems? And so we ran through a few of those kinds of discussions. And one that we didn't get to is that I do want to focus on, because I think it is really important, is this idea of pushing work backwards, or kind of batching what you need to do in larger doses, so you're not just constantly spinning your wheels. So what does this mean? Well, so if you remember from last time, like this problem arises because we said, okay, there's some stuff that in our application that like we don't always need to provide fresh information for. There's some stuff that we can cache and get very, very fast hits for, right? And what were those? So we said, like, in particular, basically the idea is like any static content that you have, you can just chuck it into a cache, right? Because, for example, like if you set up some CDN and the nodes of your CDN are really, really close to your users, and that's where all your cache data sits, like it's just one hit, grab it from the CDN and chuck it back, and like this is incredibly quick, right? Like it's on the order. It's basically the equivalent of like getting something in a computer register, on a network, right? Like, this is very, very fast, and so you can save a lot of time and money if you employ this kind of approach. But if you remember, want to go back and look at the slides, and we said, okay, well, here are the downsides of this too. You have to deal with this problem of like wanting to update your content, right? So yada yada. But okay, we said, all right, so static content, like you can cache this very easily. This is well known, right? Not a problem. But then we also talked about like, okay, well, like, so we have this feature that, we want to see like what your chess rating is in a very up-to-date manner. So as soon as you finish a game, maybe your chess rating should be updated, and you want to see what that new rate is, right? But maybe this is very computationally expensive, right? So what happens if like it's not the cheapest task in the world for you to recompute the rating for someone. And let's say like every 2 seconds, someone finishes a game. So that means every 2 seconds, you have 2 people you need to update the ratings for. Let's say this is an operation that, I don't know, like, it's like the equivalent of like 3 CPU or like 1 CPU minute or something, right? So okay, kind of a ridiculous number, but let's say it's like 1 CPU minute. So it takes, you know, it costs as much as it would for you to pay for 1 minute for CPU on AWS or something. Okay, so now so what is this? Every 2 seconds. So every second, basically, you have to compute this kind of thing. So all right, so in an hour, I have to compute 3,600. So every hour, I'm paying the equivalent of 3,600 CPU minutes, right? And so now, like, what happens? What is 3,600 divided by? See, I can't do math. This is not good. But okay, maybe you're getting the idea. So 3,600 CPU minutes is going to be like, what is this? 60, right? Okay, so it's going to be 5 days. Am I just, no. It's going to be 2.5 days worth of CPU time that you're paying for, right? So 3,600 divided by 60, that's 60, and then divided by 24 hours, that's 2.5 days, right? Okay, so now all of a sudden, like, just for an hour, this kind of work, you're paying the equivalent of having a server up for 2.5 days. So maybe you don't want to do this. That's my point. So bad math aside, right? Like the main idea is maybe it gets expensive. So then maybe you're like, okay, well, let's not update it like every second. Let's like let's do these kinds of things in a sort of incremental manner, right? So rather than doing every time someone ends the game, we say, okay, well, you're gonna do your game, but like, how much do you care if you know your rating right now? And I would guess most people that are casual players like don't really care to know their rating, like, in the second, like after they finish the game, right? Like in general, you want to know your rating over some period of time. So maybe you say, okay, let's like update these things every hour or something, right? So yeah, I guess this is what I was talking about before. Maybe I should have went with the slide immediately, but yeah, if we look at the model that we're doing right now, we're just saying, as soon as you finish something, recompute your rating and forward from there. And of course, as I said, this can be expensive. But yeah, so maybe instead of updating every time someone finishes the game, maybe we can update it for everyone, like once an hour or once a day or something. So here's like one idea of how to do this. Server, when someone says, "Hey, what's my rating?" You just say, "All right, these are the ratings that I knew."
Sorry, guys. I think the connection is pretty bad. I'm not really sure if it's for me, but or if it's for you. Can everyone hear, I guess, properly?
Yeah, I think the connection is bad to me.
Just a bit of background noise for me.
Okay. Sorry for interruption.
All right, there's like a helicopter. Okay, can you guys hear me now? Is it any better? All right, great. Okay, so there was the helicopter. If there's another helicopter, yeah, I'll figure something out. But until then, let's keep going. Okay, so what I was saying is one idea is like, over some time period, let's say the time period between like 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. Okay, what you do is you say is if someone comes to you and they ask you like, hey, what's my rating? You say, all right, well, at 12 p.m. I calculated everyone's ratings. They were this thing, so I'm just gonna give you back yours from what I know there. And in the meantime, if there are any games that people start and they end, you say, okay, well, I'm not going to update these games right now, but I'll update them at the end of the hour and recompute the standings at that point, right? So that's like this new games queue. That's what it's collecting. And then 1 p.m. hits, and you're like, all right. So in this moment, let's figure out what everyone's new standings are. Repopulate that information inside of my database so I can return new queries for updated ratings very quickly. And start the cycle in this, right? So we're kind of pushing back the boundary of when you're updating these things to kind of make the average case look up very fast, right? Yeah, so at 1 p.m., the server is like, all right, let's yank everything from this queue of games that ended, recompute, push it back into the database, clear out the queue, and move forward, right? Okay, so I hope this makes sense. I think it's pretty straightforward, but if it's not straightforward, let me know. Okay, so to wrap this discussion up, I just want to, maybe we can have a discussion real quickly about what the downsides of doing this kind of thing is that we just talked about, namely like, just batching everything. It's something that you do every hour, every day. And do you see like anything that you could think would be useful to improve upon the solution that we present here? Because it's not perfect, right? Nothing here is. So if you have any ideas, just feel free to shout them out.
Maybe like the fact that there is downtime, and we don't really want the downtime to happen. The service is unavailable for some time.
Yeah, that's a great point. Any other comments here? All right, no takers. So what Ilya is saying, I think hits right on the dot. Even if it doesn't take our service down, like what's going to happen is like all of a sudden at 1 p.m., no one's going to be able to get anything they want, right? Because all of our time is going to be, updating this kind of stuff. And what happens if it takes like 5 minutes now to update everyone's things? Well, all of a sudden, like, they're going to have this huge spike in traffic and response time, like at 1 p.m. to 1:05, right? Because like, sorry, like, what I'm doing right now? I'm updating everyone's ratings. I don't have time to, give you a new game or give you anything else that you want. So this is not a pleasant thing, right? Even if like, every 55 minutes out of an hour, your requests are really fast, it's not great if 5 minutes out of that hour, like, it's just terrible and no one can do anything, right? So this is something you have to think about. And another downside, of course, is that like again, it's not like a trivial thing to set all this stuff up, right? You have to like come up with this new service that like manages the queue, and you have to like write all this logic to update the ratings and write all of them and clear the queue. You have to like make sure it's all synchronized and there's no race conditions, and it's kind of nasty if you don't really know how to do it. So some ideas you could think about to kind of improve upon this is like, all right, well, instead of just doing this, every hour, like on a fixed time increment, let's do it, let's do it when I'm just available to do it. In the sense that, let's say there's no traffic to your server or like to a server in your web application system at any moment in time. Well, if your server is idle and just sitting around, you're still paying money for it. So why not just have it go do this work? That's like a relatively low priority, but it would still be useful to do. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, you can look up priority and event-based processing, which is all the hype these days and what all the cool kids use apparently. So yeah, just some things to think about. All right, any questions on that before we move on to the front end stuff? All right, we got 2 chats. Is it still bad?
Sometimes it gets bad, like the Zoom is lagging, but maybe I'm the only one experiencing the problem.
Interesting. No, I mean, it's probably me. Let me try.
Yeah, people in the chat are saying that it's all right now, so we can probably continue.
All right.
It's fine.
Okay. All right. So the rest of this talk will be pretty easy going. Yeah. If you have any particular commentary, as usual, just feel free to jump out, yell it out if you have any questions. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about in general is this idea of rendering your web applications, right? So the premise here is like, okay, you have some application. Let's say it's like this live chess app thing, and you want to give it to somebody, right? To one of your users, for example, and you know they're going to load it up. Like, of course, you know the browser is going to display it in some way, and so now you have kind of this question of like, okay, well, should I kind of figure out what my entire page looks like ahead of time, figure out what all the HTML content is on the server side, and ship that over to my user, or should I kind of like let them do the majority of the work? So maybe instead, like you send like some JavaScript bundle and you say, all right, like here's how you create, here's how you create like the layout of what my page looks like using JavaScript, and I'm going to ship this over to you, and like this payload will dynamically, quote unquote, like lay out the page as time goes on, rather than me having to pre-compute all the HTML and ship it all at once, right? So maybe it's not clear immediately like why we would want to have a distinction between these two things, or why there would even be a distinction between these two things to begin with. But maybe this is like a good exercise to kind of that I want to pose to y'all. Like, do you see any potential advantages or disadvantages of both of these models? And if you don't, that's okay. I'm just curious what people think.
I think search engine optimization doesn't work when you just load everything on demand.
Why?
Because I think browser, not the search engine crawlers, I think they just load the first HTML like page loaded, and then if you load in content using JS, you probably won't be like indexed. Or maybe I misunderstood the two options.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I was just, yeah, that's it.
And some performance, I guess, like the time like when you get the HTML loaded, all the content is already there on the first load. It's a little bit faster.
Yep. Yeah, so that'd be like an advantage for the ahead of time pre-computation. Any other comments here? Okay, yeah, so let's just run through like a few of them. So if we think about like, so let's just kind of like look at the induced pros and cons, that maybe you can get a better model for why one is better than the other, right? Or when they're not. So if you think about what it means to pre-compute content of a page beforehand, you already know like what the layout's going to be. So as you send it off to the client, and the browser can render it right away. There's no, the JavaScript engine doesn't need to execute anything to figure out, what the DOM should look like. So in that sense, you have a much faster load of the page initially. And furthermore, like this is exactly what a static site is, right? If you just send all the HTML immediately, like, okay, well, there's nothing more for me to do. I know what this thing looks like, it's very easy for people to on the server side. Of course, the downside now is like, okay, well, let's say I have some new content on my page. The only way I can get it, without having some kind of hybrid model, is by loading another page from the server, right? So like imagine you had like some chat application where every time you send a message or receive a message, you need to reload the page. Okay, so maybe it's not terrible, but certainly the user experience could probably be improved a little bit, right? And of course, the other downside to this is like, you're going to end up having to send more requests to the server inevitably, because anytime you want some new information, you have to hit this guy. So on the other hand, like, if you just ship some JavaScript bundle and you say, okay, well, like here are the JavaScript components that make up my page, and like here's some way to set them up. It maybe is a little bit better. Yeah, I do think it's the outside too, but maybe it's a little bit better to kind of make a more friendly user experience. So like instead of having to reload my page when I send a chat message or receive one, like I can kind of just like, push in like a new text bubble or something, right? And this is not something that you can do if you don't have any, if you don't have any dynamic scripting to enable this kind of action, which you can only get on the web through JavaScript, effectively, right? Okay, so maybe you can, I'm kind of lying there, but you get what I'm saying. The other upside of this client-side rendering is like, to some degree, maybe you don't need a server at all. So instead of having to like deal with, with someone who gets a request and like, okay, like this is coming from Jane Doe, right? Let me fill in like Jane Doe's name into my template, compile that HTML and like send it back. Like, now you can just send over a JavaScript bundle that responds dynamically on the client side anyway. And so there's no need, maybe there's no need for your server to do extra work. And then you can use something like a CDN. And as was mentioned though, right, like the downside of this thing is that, web crawlers are never going to run JavaScript on your web page. It's a terrible idea, right? So, Google's not going to pick up the description of your web page if you dynamically generate it. And maybe the first load is going to be a little bit slow. So you need to take in maybe it's very large JavaScript bundle and execute all of it to figure out what the page looks like. But of course, then maybe you don't. You're going to have faster loads later on when you get new information, because as I mentioned before, if you get a new chat message, you only have to ask, hey, what's this chat message look like? You don't have to say, what does my whole web page look like now? Right? Okay. All right. So in practice, you're really just going to balance both of these things, right? It's not the case that everyone just writes web pages, that just have HTML rendered on the server side and no JavaScript or CSS in them. I mean, there are those kinds of pages, but in realistic applications, this is not the case. And neither is it the case that you just ship over something that's not like pre-rendered or pre-processed by the server. It's literally just like a block of JavaScript. Right? So there's going to be some mix of both these things, and if you think about it, like that's what we want, right? Because there's trade-offs on both sides of these. Maybe for some application you want to mix and match these, right? So I'm kind of waving my hands a little bit here, but I hope you can see like where you might want to pick out different pros and cons of these things for figuring out what fits your middle ground. So, just kind of elaborate this this point a little bit further, right? Like we know that highly dynamic content is the thing that's important, and here is like what you need JavaScript to be sent over and to render on the client side. But again, like you have to account for the fact that especially like if you're a marketing person or you want your business to explode or something like this, like you need search engine optimization, you need search engines to pick up what you're doing. In that case, you cannot expect a search engine to just evaluate your arbitrary JavaScript bundle. And furthermore, there's a lot of stuff that like there's no need to kind of render it on the client side. For example, if you have like a homepage for a product, there are a few use cases where you need to kind of be dynamic about that loading. If it's just like a picture of what your product is and an information description, certainly you can write this beforehand and just have an HTML template ready to go. There's much less of a need to kind of dynamically update things on the fly, right? Because that's not just doesn't make sense there. But yeah, but also like as we mentioned before, you can't do this for everything. Like this dynamic content is something. But okay, so there's like a there. So you might think too, like, okay, well, maybe it's the best if I can kind of set up my application or something so that everything on it is static. Like maybe that would be the perfect solution too. Well, it turns out like that's not the case either, because then building things takes forever. And to have like any kind of useful application, like you're going to need a lot of web pages to handle, to express many different states of your application, right? So imagine you have this, and then like you go and like try to build all this stuff, right? So first of all, like try to imagine like storing 50,000 static web pages that are non-trivial, right? It's not going to be the cheapest thing in the world. But also like if you're using some kind of static site generator that makes your life a little bit easy and makes it easier for you to build a website with static pages in a manner other than just like writing out the HTML for every single page, maybe using some kind of scripts or templates or whatever. Like, it's gonna take a while to build that stuff. So this is some issue that I saw some time ago on Gatsby, which is one of these static site generators that was like, hey, like, yeah, we don't know how to build 50K plus page apps because like we never thought someone would do that, and now we're getting complaints about it. And so if you have a 50K plus page web app, like please hit us up and so we can examine it, because like they just don't know how to optimize for that, because who would think to optimize for that? But apparently it's a real thing. And so it's not all sunshine and rainbows on this side too, is what I'm trying to say. So this is kind of anecdotal and sort of maybe on the extreme scale, but the point that I'm really trying to hammer home is like you're going to need to find some balance in between these two things. Maybe that's obvious, but I hope that at least kind of makes you chuckle. Okay. All right. So any questions on that? All right. Not all at once. Okay. So another thing I want to talk about is, maybe this will be a little bit more interesting. We're not going to dive into these kinds of case studies like we did with the live chat stuff, but we will look at a couple examples in terms of what you can do to kind of deal with squeezing out performance for your application that you ship to a client, right? So to kind of build up a basis for this, let's like talk about what it means to have a nice user interaction. Are there any takers here? Like if you're a user and let's say you're like playing a game on a web page, what are like the things that you want from that, where you have a nice experience?
Performance like has to be fast.
Okay, yeah, I would agree.
It has to be like aesthetically pleasing, visually, I mean.
Yeah, for sure. Jets, nice designs. Yeah. Okay, there's another helicopter. So let me just get inside. I gotta figure this out. Give me a second. Okay. Sorry about this. I guess I'm not. So, all right. So I'm back. Let's keep going. Where's this thing? Yeah. Okay. So y'all make great points. I would say there's like, you can kind of boil this down to three things. In my opinion, and certainly you can come up with more, but first of all, you know, whatever work you have to do, let's make that as fast as possible. Second of all, like, let's make sure that we only do what we need to do. Let's like not waste our time doing stuff that we don't care about. And third of all, like, let's make things accessible. So this is kind of what I mean by accessible is kind of an overarching term to say interactive and aesthetically pleasing, and also like comprehensible and understandable for many people, right? So this is like good design and aesthetic, and also like, you know, is in your language and understandable, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let's like talk about this one first. Is like, you know, don't waste your time doing extra work that you don't need to do. So this is a very broad question, but let's, you know, again, put yourself in the shoes of like, you build some generic web application. What are the kinds of things that you would maybe want to think about in terms of like, here's where I don't want to do extra work that I don't need to. Like, here's where I should look to see if I'm doing extra work.
By application work, do you mean like the work on the front end side or on the back end side?
Yeah, on the front end side.
Maybe we can process some, like, if we're building an application where front end requests some information from the back end, so like not server rendering thing, maybe we can format information on the back end and set it to the front end, already sorted and like already prepared for just for visualization, so that the front end didn't need to sort information or do anything on the data.
Yeah, for sure. Any other ideas here? Yeah, so this is a very broad question, right? This is not, I'm not trying to like wave you one way or the other. This is just, you know, maybe something that you'll want to think about later on too. But you know, like maybe some additional ideas we can think of is also like, you know, we were talking about before, you know, this idea of like, you can either figure out what all your HTML looks like all at once and ship it over, or kind of dynamically load it. And when it makes sense to dynamically load it is like, you know, when you have stuff, maybe you have a lot of content on your page, like you have an infinite scrolling Instagram feed or something. You don't want to load all those images at once, right? Because there could be thousands of those. You know, maybe you're going to save that loading until someone scrolls down to there. Another thing is like, well, you know, let's say someone requests, you know, a certain kind of image like 10 times. Like maybe they look up like an Instagram story like 10 times or something. It's like, well, maybe we can save that. Maybe we can cache that information like in our web page state, so we can show them a little bit faster than having to, you know, look it back up again. And the third idea is maybe, all right, well, what happens if someone like, you know, moves away from our web page and then comes back quickly? Wouldn't it be kind of nice, like if we could preserve that state when they come back to us, rather than having to do anything anew? And so here you can kind of question like, okay, well, what part of this like belongs to the server side? Like what part belongs to what I'm doing on my front end? What part belongs response to like the thing that's underlying all of this, which is the browser. And these are important questions. There's like a hodgepodge of things to think about. Right? These are just 3 examples. Okay, so we're just going to look at a couple of these examples, particularly these last 2 things. And I was going to point out like some things about web browsers that kind of help in this regard. And maybe some of these things are things that you already know, maybe not. Okay, so the first thing is that browsers obviously realize that like caching content would be a good thing to start off with, right? So if you go to what's the one page? Okay, so my favorite example is the New York Times. So if you go to the NewYorkTimes.com, right, maybe it has like this index.js bundle. That doesn't change too much, right? So you can just download it once, and the browser will probably be smart enough to be like, all right, well, if this person comes back to the New York Times again, maybe I need to update the content, but the JavaScript and the CSS styles probably don't. So I'll just cache it, and I'll keep it around. And next time they make the request for it, like I can just give them back what I have already, and so I don't have to do extra work, right? But of course, like now we had this cache busting problem that we had before, talked about last time with the CDN stuff. What if all of a sudden you go to the New York Times and they're like, hey, like get index.js, but the browser's like, well, I have index.js, I'm done. But it turns out that we should have gotten a new one because the New York Times, all of a sudden shipped it with a new version of the application with changes to the JavaScript file. Does anyone know like a trick to deal with this problem? To kind of force the browser to get a new version of the resource rather than the old one.
Is there like HTTP header that specifies the time when this particular file was updated, like the last update time, and whenever we need, basically every time we need a new resource, the browser, instead of using the cached one, I think it's just sending a request to the backend, like providing the date that it has, like the date of the last update of the file. I don't know what I'm saying, but like basically it's HTTP header that specifies the last date that the file was updated. Is there such a thing, or am I missing something?
Yeah. So you can specify this thing called time to live. You can say like, all right, I'm going to give you this resource. You can cache it for 6 weeks. After 6 weeks, you have to assume that it's expired and ask me for a new one, right? So you can do this. It has kind of this nice advantages that we talked about last time with the pull-based model. Of course, the issue here though is like, what happens if you change your resource 3 weeks through? Now someone's not going to get it for another 3 weeks. So any other ideas here? Change name of the file with version. Can you be more specific here? What do you mean? Because I can't change. Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
I think there's also a trick, index.html, but I think it works with CSS mainly. Like you can specify the version of CSS you're downloading. So if you like change your styles, because you like rarely change your style, you have to like upgrade the version. So the browser re-downloads that CSS file.
Yeah, so I think you and Syed are kind of on the right track. So one thing, these are all valid solutions, but one that I'm going to describe is like this idea of like adding a query parameter to any resource that you have. So it turns out that the way that these caches are implemented in browsers is, they cache the entire URL, right? But when I ask to go load a resource like a JavaScript file, for example, I load the resource regardless of what the query parameter on it is, right? So if some if I get asked to load this index.js blah 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 blah, like it's enough just to load index.js, right? Because this is like the resource descriptor. This query parameter is kind of extra information that doesn't have to do exactly like where the resource is located, right? So this is like the actual sort of path to get to the resource. This is kind of some additional information. So the cache entry contains all of this information, but to actually, to load just a single one of these resources, all I look at is this guy right here. So what you can do to force a bust in the browser cache is, every time you what is it called? Sorry, every time you publish a new version of your application, in your index.html file or whatever HTML file that is loading this this JavaScript file from, just append like a hash, append like a hash of what your what your application looks like at that time, right? So this is a very easy thing to do. For example, you can just like look at gits, like the last git commit hash, and just append that to the bundle that you ship out. And in this way, you don't have to change the file name. The file name stays the same, but you are guaranteed to bust the cache on the client side. The version, if the version of the JavaScript file that you're shipping is newer than the old one that you shipped, right? So this is kind of a nice trick. But again, you kind of have to. I think it's not obvious at all, but you kind of have to know this ahead of time, or find it kind of serendipitously until you realize that it's there. So, and okay, here's like, go ahead.
Yes, sorry. Do you usually add it like manually, or is there like a way to do it programmatically, adding a hash as a query parameter?
Yeah, I mean, you could just like, like let's say you just have some template. You could like put some variable right here, just call it like, question mark prod version hash or something. And then like, when you're building your application, like when you, as part of your build process, just replace this constant string that you have with the current hash of the application, whatever that is. It's pretty easy to.
It can be the same for all files, right? Like,
yeah,
it just needs to be different from one version of the front end to another. Yeah.
I mean, if you want, I'll write up a quick example of this maybe tonight or tomorrow morning. I'll send it off to you guys if that's something that you're interested in. But yeah, it's not a difficult thing to do at all. Also, if anyone can figure out what this thing is a hash of, let me know and I'll buy you a pizza or something. Maybe that'll be a fun exercise for you. Care. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about in terms of like what the browser helps us out with is this idea of like preserving and recovering user state. When someone's using our application, moves away. Right? So the point is here is that some time ago, I think like even 2015, browser vendors were like, hey, what's like a really common thing to do? Someone goes to a web page and then they like leave it and they're like, never mind, I didn't want to leave it. So they go back. And it's not a pleasant user experience. It's not a pleasant experience for anyone. For the user, it means that they have to like get back to the state they were in on the old web page, which might involve like a lot of like you get into like a very complex state. Like imagine you're like playing like a non-trivial game that involves like a lot of moves, and then you accidentally navigate it away, and then you have to go back and have to like do all these complicated moves again to get to where you were before. So it's not nice for the user. It's also not nice for like you as a developer or an application hoster because, well, what if it took a lot of network requests and a lot of work on your server side to get to that state as well? Now you have to incur that penalty too, right? So this is something that you might, maybe it'd be nice if the browser could cache the state when someone moved away and reload the state immediately when they come back, instead of having to do all this additional work. Right, so they introduced this thing called the backward forward cache called VF cache for short. So here's like a small video I'll show you all, demonstrating the difference. Okay, so now they've moved on to a new page. Right, so moving backward with this cache is significantly faster than moving back without it, right? Just in terms of the network latencies and if you have state, there's something else going on. Sorry, I have to click this there. Okay, so we saw some of the advantages of this, namely that you save the state, user doesn't have to do extra work. You might not have to do extra work either. Can anyone suggest some downsides of this?
You hit refresh page, and I mean, it preserves the state so much that you have to reload every page all the time. So for example, if the developer, so like the company rolls out too many of often updates and browser just caches everything, you have to reload the page all the time in order to see new updates.
Yeah, for sure. Any other ideas? Okay, yeah, so that's a great point. Go ahead.
Sorry for interruption again. Like,
no,
if the content is updating really fast, we need a way to get those updates. But if the content is cached, well, we'll not see the updates.
Yeah. So that's kind of similar to the previous point. Both of those are good points. I actually didn't think of that when I was writing this talk. But the stuff that I came up with is like, well, what if the content that I have on this web page is like very sensitive? Like maybe it's someone who's logged into the IRS and they move away from that. Do you really want to, like keep them in the same state they were when they come back? How do you know that's like that same person that clicked the back button that logged in the first place? Maybe you don't, right? And so, there you need to, like this is not a nice feature, because then you could be, exposing a very severe security liability if you allow this kind of thing, right? Another thing is like, okay, maybe your server needs to, maybe your application is set up in such a way that your server has to do like some cleanup work when someone navigates away from the page. So maybe there's like a live synchronicity between the state of someone on the client side and the state of someone on the server side. And when someone leaves a page, you want to drop that connection. Well, if the entire state is being preserved, think about like what this means. This means that the browser is also preserving the JavaScript state, right? And so when someone is using this VF cache mechanism and you move away from a page, all that state is contained. And so you don't get these events like this person has left this web page to clean up stuff before you get destroyed. You don't ever get that kind of event. And so well, now you're now you're leaking memory effectively on your server. So this is a crazy idea that you have a remote memory leak, right? Even if someone never comes back, maybe it takes a couple hours for this memory leak to go away because this VF cache stays around for a while. And kind of tangentially, like, this might throw off what you interpret as visits to your webpage, right? So what does it mean to visit your webpage? Does it mean anytime someone comes, from a previous location to your webpage? Because in that case, someone goes to your webpage, and then goes 5 web pages forward, and then 5 web pages back. Maybe you want to count that as 2 things. But in the way that we described it, if you cache everything, then the previous state is reloaded when someone goes back 5 steps and goes to the web page that they were on before, And again, your application is not going to get this event that everything has been loaded for the first time. And how are you supposed to report a new page visit? That kind of situation, you can't really. That's the problem. So I bring this up just to say, like, this is like a very nice thing that we're being provided. It has a lot of benefits, for the user and for us, as we described. But there are these kinds of problems that can be very severe problems that still come up. And they are kind of difficult to deal with because the way that this kind of stuff is implemented is you can't be very granular about it. You can't say, like, okay, if someone is in this state on this web page, don't put me in the backward forward cache. You can only say this web page should never be put in the cache, or should always be put in the cache. Right? You can't, like, really programmatically decide whether you want to be in the cache or not. You have to say when the web page is loaded in your HTTP headers whether it can be cached or not. Right. Okay. So any questions on these two things? We're gonna wrap up with some crazy JavaScript weirdness. But yeah. Anything on this before we move on? Okay. All right. So we have 5 minutes left, and I don't think we'll get to internationalization this time, but that's okay. There's some interesting links on this that I'll leave in the chat, or I'll leave in the slides that I'll post. You guys might, like, clicking on this, you'll see one way that people have implemented internationalization in the Angular web framework. And as you might imagine, it's not a very easy problem, and there's a couple of descriptions of why this is. But okay, so let's do like one fun thing before we run out of time. So if you're building like front end web app, right? We talked about before. I think Syed mentioned this, that whatever you do, you want to do it quickly, right? You don't want to have slow algorithms. You don't want to like be spinning your wheels waiting for something that's never going to happen, right? So these are kinds of things that you've already learned in your introductory CS classes. Like, be a good, have good data structures, have good algorithms, whatever. But I think in this world where we're dealing with languages like JavaScript, it's even more tricky because it's not enough to have a good data structure or a good algorithm. You have to also understand how those data structures are being run by the JavaScript engine, right? Because they're not just being compiled down to machine code where you're kind of guaranteed these nice things about the compilation process. In this case, it's very much dependent on what the JavaScript engine implementation decides to do. And they try to be smart, and in trying to be smart and optimizing things as well, they get tricky. And once you get tricky, it's very hard for people to understand what you're doing. Okay. And so to kind of show you one example of this, I want to show you like the impact of accessing an object versus accessing just like a variable directly, or a property access on an object rather than just a variable directly. What I mean by this is, like, let's look at the following example. Okay, so these two blocks of code do the exact same thing. Okay, in the first one, we're declaring an object that's a dog. It has two properties: sound and make noise. Make noise is a function that logs its parameter, and sound is just the string bark. Yeah, thanks, Ilya. And then we call dog make noise of our sound, which is bark. In the second one, we're doing, we're encoding the same kind of information, but instead of having an object and using these property accesses that we did here, we just encode them as like direct variables, right? So we're saying this dog sound is bark, and dog make noise is a function that logs its parameter, and then we call this make noise with the dog sound, right? okay, so this is actually not what I wanted. So maybe we'll run this again and get the get the result that I expect. But okay, so in this one we're like accessing a property, doing all our operations that way. And here when we're accessing a constant. Okay, so this is kind of a contrived example. It's like a very, very small example. So you know, don't trust micro benchmarks, but okay, basically what I want to show is that if you run this enough times and you get lucky, this one will be slower, or this one will be faster. And in general, this one is a lot faster. And if you're interested in the reason why, well, maybe have a think about it, and maybe you can come up with some ideas. But also, like, feel free to email me, because I love talking about this stuff. So I would love to talk about this more. But to show you in real life that this is like actually a severe problem. This Evan W guy is the guy who he's like the CTO of Figma, I think. So he did this analysis for TypeScript, and he said, okay, well, you guys are leaving, like, what is this, 2/9.5? Yeah, you guys are leaving like 6.7% of performance on the table by doing all these property accesses. So he said, okay, if you convert all your property accesses to just constant variables or just to variables, you're going to get a 6.7% speed up, which is crazy, right? And in fact, there's this thing called the closure compiler, which is the thing that Google wrote, which does this kind of optimization. So if you have code like this, it will rewrite all of them into constants like this, because it knows that that's like a real advantage it gives you. So again, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, email me or DM me, and we can talk more about it. Yeah, maybe, you know, this is just to point out that, you know, there's kind of tricky things going on here, and maybe we need to think a little bit more about, the deeper consequences of whatever code you write, and just like, all right, well, you know, I should use a map here instead of an associative, right? Something like that, right? Okay, so we're out of time. I just want to mention that next time, you know, we're gonna kind of talk about the more, I guess, human or managerial side of all this web application and building architecture stuff. And this, I think, is kind of the most interesting, and is maybe like the thing that we get the least exposure to, especially as undergrads or people that haven't even really started their career yet. So you know, this is the part that I have the least knowledge on, and I'm gonna make some very bold claims, but, you know, maybe it'll be fun to talk about altogether. But yeah, so please leave feedback at this link if you have any. It's highly appreciated, and I'll take any questions or comments if you'll have them.